Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are going to talk about Databricks Asset Bundles. Now you might also know Databricks Asset Bundles as DABs. And today we are going to see how Databricks Asset Bundle helps you to deploy Databricks assets like notebooks, jobs, pipelines, etc. from one environment to different environment. Now, on my screen, you can find the documentation for Databricks Asset Bundle. Now, if I scroll down, it gives you a high-level architecture how Databricks Asset Bundle can help you to deploy your assets in different environments using CICD process. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see that we can build our project bundle on local dev environment, and then we can deploy it on development workspaces. Later, you can use version control like repository and use a CI/CD process like Azure pipelines to deploy it in different other workspaces like QA, staging, or production. Now, you can do this local dev in your own machine using some code editors like PyCharm or VS Code, right? But today we are going to build this into Databricks Workspace itself. We're going to build our bundle in the Databricks Workspace, deploy it in dev, put it in version control using repos, and then we are going to create in our next video an Azure pipeline that would help us to deploy it in different workspace like QA. Okay, so before we can begin with this, if you have not seen our previous video about Databricks repos and Databricks CLI, I recommend you to go back and watch those videos first because those would be used in this video. Again, this video also requires you to have certain amount of knowledge about Git. So if you are not aware of Git, I would recommend you to learn at least the basics of Git before starting with this. So without any further delay, let's begin. I am back in my Databricks workspace. Now, we are going to consider this particular workspace, which is Ease with Data ADB as dev workspace. And if I go to my account console, in our previous video in this playlist, we have configured one more workspace, which is Ease with Data ADB QA, which I'll consider as a QA workspace. And once we build our dApps project today, we are going to deploy the dApps project in dev today. And in our upcoming video using Azure pipelines, we are going to deploy that particular dApps in QA environment. Okay, so I'll quickly go back to my dev workspace. Now on my screen, you can see a particular folder which is ADB CICD, and we are on a branch feature demo. Now we have already worked with this particular Git folder and branch in our previous video when we configured the Git folders for Databricks. And we are going to use the same branch and the same folder today for creating our dApps project. Now you can follow this whole exercise on your favorite editor in your local environment, but I'm going to do everything on the Databricks workspace today. Now, the first thing that has to be done is to initialize a dApps project. Now, simple and the most easiest way to create a dApps project is to fire a CLI command, Databricks bundle init. And once you fire that particular command, a template for the dApps project will automatically get created. Now, you can do that if you're working on your local machine. Now, since we are already working on a Databricks workspace, we are going to configure everything from scratch. I want you to do that so that you understand whatever we are writing in that YAML template, you can understand each piece of it. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file and I'm going to configure my Databricks bundle project. So I'll just click on create. I'll select file. Okay. And now I'll just close this on the left hand side so that we have enough space. And now I'm going to rename this file. It is important that you rename this file to databricks.yml. Okay, this is for YAML, and this is important that you name it as databricks.yml. The reason is Databricks asset configuration comes from this particular file itself. As soon as you place this file, this is identified as a dApps project. Now, the first thing that we need to do in this file is to give the name of the bundle. So we'll just type bundle. Okay, and then I'll hit enter. Now, this is a YAML file. It is important that you see that you are maintaining proper spacing or indentation in this particular file, else this will not work. Okay, so the first thing is the name of the bundle. So I'll just type name, and the name I'll give is dav demo. Okay, this stands for Databricks Asset Bundle demo. Okay, now we can configure a lot of things in this YAML file. Even you can write the whole Databricks Asset Bundle configuration in this YAML file itself. You don't even need to create different folders, but we are going to structure it properly so that you can understand how a dApps project is created in a production scenario. Okay. Now, the next thing that we put in a dApps configuration is resources. Okay. Now, again, resources means the resources that you are going to deploy. Okay. So I'll just put a hash because we are not going to write our resources here. I'm just putting a comment called resources should be here. Okay. Now, the next thing that we'll configure is permission for this whole dApps project. Okay. So permission as in means who can see this particular dApp project, who would have access to manage it, who would have access to run it. Okay. So there are different kind of permissions that are available for dApps, and you can go ahead and check out that in documentation. For now, I'll just put basic permission, which will be applicable on the whole project. Later on resources, you can specify specific permissions. Whatever permission is being specified here at the bundle configuration would be applied throughout this dApp project. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a minus here, which simply implies in a YAML file, this is an array. Okay. Now I'm going to put group name. Okay. So who would have permission to this particular bundles project? This particular group should have this permission. And this is why I'm writing DE underscore group. Now, if you remember, we already created a DE group in our particular workspace. So this particular group should have what permission? So I'll just type label, and this is where we will give what permission this DE group should have. So it should have can manage permission. That means until we specify any specific permission on any of the resources, this DE group would have can manage permission on whole of the project. Means whatever resources will be created and on this project, this particular group will have can manage. Now, if you are going to specify specific permissions on resources, it is going to override this particular permission, which we have defined at the top level. Okay. So I'll let it be for now. And now the most important part is the targets. Okay. Now what is target? Targets are basically the environments where you want to deploy this bundle project. Okay. So for example, dev is one of our target, right? Now for dev, it is important that we specify the mode as development. This simply means that this environment, whatever we are configuring, is a development environment. Okay. And we are not going to specify this mode for any other environment. Okay. Now the next thing we'll specify is default. Okay. In case you don't specify any targets while deploying your dApps project, this would be considered as a default. Okay. So if you don't specify any target, whatever you deploy would deploy to dev. Okay. And the next thing that we need to specify is the workspace for this development environment, right? So I'll just type workspace, and then I need to specify the host. Okay. Host would be the URL of your workspace. So I'll just copy the URL from the top and I'll paste here. Okay. So I just missed the net. So it would be like this. Okay. So now we have configured our first target. So this is where our development environment resides, right? Similarly, we can configure one more environment, which is our QA. So I'll just copy this for now and I'll paste it here. Okay. And I'll change it to QA. Okay. And the mode, I'll remove it because this is no longer our development environment. So I'll just remove it. And this would not be our default environment. Okay. And I have to change this workspace host here, right? And I'll do this later. For now, I'll let it be. Okay. Now, if you see, we have configured the basics of our bundle and we have not defined the resources that we are going to deploy as part of this bundle. Okay. So what I'm going to do is we are also going to specify certain things like variables and all, but we are going to do it in a more structured way. Okay. So now we are going to create a folder structure and we are going to structure our bundle in that particular folders. Okay. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a folder here called resources. Okay. And I'm going to move this notebook within resources. Okay. So all of our jobs, pipelines and everything would reside within this resources folder. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to create is another folder at the parent called SRC. Okay. This is where all of our source code for dabs would be residing. Okay. Now within this, I'm going to create a folder called environment. Okay. And within this environment folder, we are going to configure some of the environment specific configurations, okay, for our targets. And one more thing that I would add here is a variable file. So what I'll do is I'll just create a file called variables.yaml. Okay. And this would be used to maintain all of our variable for this bundle project. Okay. So now we have just configured the basic. Okay. Let's create few more folders here. For example, we will also bring in jobs, right? So I'll just type jobs, and you might have resources like pipelines as well. So I'll just type pipelines. Okay. You can have different other resources like dashboards, schemas and all. You can configure n number of things. You can just go ahead and check out the documentation. For this example, I'm going to just consider a simple example so that you understand how it works. Later, you can do a lot of stuff in dabs. Okay, I'll just go back to resources again, and I'll go to Databricks YAML. Okay, now I don't need to specify the resources here. We are going to do that in the resources folder. So I'm going to remove it from here. But in place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write include. Now, include will do what? Whatever we specify inside the YAML files, we are going to include this in this particular parent YAML file so that those can be reassembled directly from this particular file. Now, the first thing that we'll configure is we'll put minus and we'll provide the path. Okay, I'll just type src slash star dot YAML. Now, within src, we have variables.yaml, right? That would be included here. Now, within src, we will have a folder called environment, and within that we will have few YAMLs, right? So we are going to bring that as well. So I'll just type .yaml here. Okay, star.yaml. Now the next thing would be resources. So I'll just type resources slash we have jobs, right? So I'll just type jobs star.yaml. Now all of the configurations that we specify for dabs, we specify in YAML files. Okay, now again we will have pipelines, right? So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it here and I'll change it as pipelines. Okay, now you might be thinking, why didn't I bring in notebooks? Because notebooks would be called in by the jobs. You don't need to call it in the dabs because jobs and pipelines would call the notebooks. You need to just deploy the jobs. The jobs would call the notebook automatically. And in the parent bundle folder, you will have everything there. From there, the job would call that particular notebook and execute. And we are going to see that. So nothing to worry as of now. Just we have to make sure that we include everything and we put star.yaml so that every file that we create within resources and src, the YAML files, that gets included within this project. Our template for the dab is almost ready. Now we can go ahead and configure our jobs, pipelines, okay, and the environment specific configurations. Before we can go ahead and configure jobs and pipelines, there's one more important thing to note. On the left hand side, you can see this rocket symbol, right? If I hover over, it says deployments. And this is where you can use the GUI in order to deploy your resources using dApps. Okay. And if it is not enabled for you on the left hand side, what you need to do is click on the top right hand icon, this profile icon that you see, go to previews. Okay. And then in the previews, just search for bundle. Okay. And you have to enable this option which says collaborate on Databricks Asset Bundles for the workspace. This is right now in public preview, but once you enable this, you should be able to see this particular icon here. Okay, and this would help us to deploy your asset bundles using GUI, okay, on this particular workspace. And we are going to see that later. For now, I'll just click on this workspace folder. And now what we are going to do is we are going to configure a job and a pipeline. And we already know how to create jobs and how to create pipelines. I'm not going to show that again. What I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to create a sample job and a pipeline for you. And we are going to include those assets in this particular dApps project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two notebooks, one for job and one for pipeline. And I'm going to create one job and I'm going to create one pipeline. Okay. I'm not going to explain anything. I'm going to create those on my screen and you can follow along. We just configured a job and it would run a notebook which will just do a range of 10 and display. Okay. Now we are going to configure a pipeline. So we are going to create a lake flow pipeline, or you can say DLT pipeline, in which we are going to create a streaming orders table. We are going to read the streaming source, which is a samples TPCH orders table. Okay, this is delta table. And then we are going to aggregate from the streaming table, which is ST orders. We are going to get the count of orders based on order status. Okay, this is a simple DLT, or you can say lake flow pipeline, that we have written in SQL. Okay, now let me just configure the pipeline quickly. Okay, so now we are configuring a lake flow pipeline, or you can say DLT pipeline. Okay, we are using that same notebook. We are writing it in a Unity catalog. The catalog is dev, and we are using schema as bronze. We are going to configure this in our dabs, and we are going to make it dynamic. For now, we are considering dev and bronze. Okay, and we are going to put worker as 1. Okay, and we have configured standard D4DSV5 as the driver and 1 worker. Okay, so our pipeline is created. I'll just click on create. Awesome. Now that we have created a demo pipeline and a demo job, what we are going to do is we are going to add those in our dApps project. So how to add a pipeline code which we have already built in our dApps project? The simple way is, in case of a pipeline, just click on this 3 dots, view YAML settings, just copy this whole YAML here. Just click on this copy here. It will copy the whole YAML. Just go back to your dApps project, go to say resources, go to pipelines, and then create a new file here. Okay, and give this pipeline a name. For example, I'll give the same name, which is DLT, say demo DLT. I'll give dab demo orders. Okay, and I'll hit enter. And what I'll do is I'll close in on the left hand side, and now I'll paste that YAML here. Okay, and now we will change few things here. For example, you can see everything is fine. This is a resource, right? You can see resources here. Now the pipeline name, I'll let it be whatever it is. The cluster settings, I'll let it be. The thing that I'll change is the path of the notebook. Right now it is giving the absolute path, right? But we already know we have this here, right? Right outside this pipelines, we have notebooks folders, and within this notebook folder, I have this DLT demo orders, right? So what we'll do is we'll just use relative path. So I'll just type dot dot slash. So dot dot means it will get out of this pipeline folder, it will get inside this notebook folder, and it will use this particular notebook. Okay, we have to make sure this particular notebook, whatever we are calling here, should follow the extension of that notebook. Okay, so we have saved that notebook as SQL, so we are just putting .SQL here, okay, for that particular notebook. So if you remember, if I go back to this particular notebook here, okay, I went in this file and I changed the notebook format to source format, right? So this is a SQL notebook, so we should use .SQL for this pipeline. Okay, we are referring this as .SQL. Same thing we have to configure for the job. So what we'll do is we'll create a file here. Okay, and now I'll give the name of the file. I'll just give dab demo job. Okay, I'll just put .yaml because everything should be .yaml. I'll hit enter. Okay, let's see if I have configured the pipeline as .yaml or not. So I have not done .yaml. We have to do everything in this as .yaml. Okay, so I'll just put .yaml here. Okay, notebook should be in the source format, but whatever you configure the jobs and the pipelines, the configuration should be in .yaml. Okay, so now I've configured this. I'll open this file. Okay, now we'll go to the job that we have configured. So this was the job that we configured. I'll click on this 3 dot. I'll click on edit as YAML. I'll copy everything from here. Okay, I'll go back and I'll paste it here. Okay, now I'll change certain things. For example, let the task, whatever it is, again we are going to change this to relative path. So I'll just put dot dot slash notebooks. And since this notebook is Python, so I'll just type .py. Okay, this is workspace. Now in our job cluster, we are going to use this. And if you see, we are enabling photon. Okay, we are using number of workers as 8. So let's change this. I'll use number of workers as 1. This is single user. We are not going to use photon. So I'll just remove this and I'll let it be whatever it is. Okay, so we have configured our job. We have configured our pipeline. Okay, so we have done the configuration for our resources now. Okay, so our resources configuration is complete. Let's go ahead and configure our environment now. Okay, so I'll just close everything here. So these are no longer required. We have just created one demo job and we have just created one demo pipeline. Okay, and now we are going to configure our target, or you can say environment specific configurations. Okay, so I'll just go into sources, I'll go into environment, and now I'll create one file for dev first. Okay, so I'll just click here and it will create a file and we will use dev.yaml. Okay, and now we will first use called targets. Okay, and this is for dev, so our target is dev. I'll just write dev, and now we can specify configurations. For example, we want to configure specific permissions in dev, so we can just write permissions. So if you remember, we configure bundle level permission. Now here we are configuring environment specific permissions. Okay, so for example, we will just type group name. Okay, for DE group, we are going to provide it permission as can manage on dev. Okay, let's go ahead and create one more for QA. Okay, so I'm just going to type control A QA.yaml. Okay, now I'm just going to copy everything from the dev to QA. So I'll just copy everything from here and I'll paste it here. Okay, I'll change the target as QA because this is for QA. Now in QA, we don't want the DE group to have everything as can manage. We want them to give permission only to run stuff. Okay, and to view. Okay, so I'll just say can run. So they can run jobs, but they cannot manage the jobs. Okay, in QA environment. Similarly, I'll copy this for notebooks and other assets. They can view, but they cannot manage. So I'll just type can view. Okay, so they should be able to see the bundle configurations and they should be able to run the jobs, but they would not be able to manage in QA environment. Okay, so this is environment specific configuration. Similarly, for dev, they can manage everything on dev because this is for data engineering group and they should manage everything on dev, right? So even you can go ahead and add this directly in the Databricks YAML if you wish. Okay, here in the bottom, if you wish to add the permissions here, you can go ahead and add them, but it is a better way to maintain them in separate files. So in future, you don't have to touch the parent file. Rather, you can change the environment specific configurations in the related files and those should work fine, right? Now, one more thing that I would add for dev is called presets. Now, presets would allow multiple developers to work on the same environment and deploy same resources with different names. Okay, so I'll just type presets. Okay, and I'll give name prefix. Okay, what name prefix we can give? So we'll say dev is the environment, and then we can give them a particular variable which is already inbuilt, which says workspace dot current user dot sort name. Okay, so what will happen is anything that you deploy would have dev and the sort name of you. For example, if I deploy it using ease with data, so we'll see dev and ease with data along with the job names, okay, along with the resources names. This is because so that if someone else also deploy on the dev, they will have their own jobs. For example, dev and DE, for example, the data engineer is there, so it would be like data engineer and the job name. Okay, so each user can have their own specific resources deployed if you specify presets, and this is only applicable for dev. Okay, you don't want people to have same job deployed with different names in QA, right? But people can test same job with different names in dev environment because multiple people can be working on the same job, right? So they can have their own specific jobs, and this is why you can go ahead and use name prefixes so that the same job can be deployed with different name prefixes and people can have their own resources in order to work with. Okay, so this is the usefulness of presets. Now the next thing that we'll do is we'll just add variables. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll add one variable for catalog, because what we are going to do is we are going to have different catalogs. Like we are going to have dev catalog in dev environment. We are going to have QA catalog in QA environment. And we should deploy dev resources in dev catalog and QA resources in QA catalog. And that is why we should be able to pass the catalog name. Okay. And now I'll give the name of the variable. For example, I'll just name it as catalog. Okay. And I'll give a description for this. So I'll say this is the name of the target catalog. Okay, now you can provide a default value. For example, if nothing is specified for the catalog value, you will specify this as a dev. You can configure more variables that you need. Okay, for now this looks good. Now one more thing that we'll do is we'll create schema. Okay, since we have created our pipeline, if you remember in our pipeline we had to specify catalog, right, and schema, right? So we also have to create schema. Correct, it is not mandatory that we'll have the schema present in our QA catalog, right? So we also have to create the schema in order to make sure that our pipeline works. So let's create our schema as well. So I'll quickly go back into the resources and I'll create one more folder here, say schemas. Okay, and within this folder we will specify the schema. So I'll just create again a file, and for example the name of our schema would be bronze. Okay, so I'll just say bronze schema YAML. Okay, now I'll just type resources because this is also a resource, right? And then I have to specify schemas. So for example, we'll just call it as bronze schema. Okay, and now we will name the schema, whatever is the actual name of the schema. So our actual name would be bronze, and next the name of the catalog. So you can just type catalog underscore name. And now if you remember, we have already configured a variable called catalog, right? We should pass this as the catalog name. So that is what we are going to do. So the catalog name would be the variable, right? So in order to call a variable, you just have to type dollar, and then within curly braces, you have to type var dot, then the name of the variable. So our name is catalog. So whatever variable we pass for catalog, that would be used as the catalog name, and schema that would be created with the name of bronze. And this is our name prefix for schemas, and this is a resource. Okay, so you understand how you can create schemas, now how you can create pipelines, jobs, and how notebooks are referred within your jobs and pipelines. Okay, so we are almost done with our bundle configuration. So if I quickly go back to my Databricks YAML, so what we have done here is we have specified our bundle configuration. We have included all of our resources. We have provided a permission here at the parent level. Now we have defined different targets like dev and QA. For now, we will not touch anything related to QA. We'll just deploy our DAB in dev. In our next video, when we configure Azure pipeline, we are going to change the values for QA, and we are going to use Azure pipeline to deploy it in QA. Okay. So this all looks good to me. Let's click on this rocket icon, which says deployment. And now we will validate. In order to validate, just click on this refresh button here. Okay. What it would do is it would quickly look what all bundles and what all resources has to be deployed. So let's just wait for it to complete. Awesome. Now, if you see, it has already detected that it would deploy a job like this. And now if you see the preset here, dev is with data and then the name of the job. And this is why we used preset, right? Now, if I change it to QA, for example, you will not see the preset here because we have not specified the preset for QA. Okay, so let's just wait for it to refresh. Now if you see, it is the exact name of the pipeline, and that is what we need in QA and production, right? We don't want presets. And for the jobs, again, the same exact name of the job, right? But we are not going to deploy in QA, so we are just going to change it to dev for now. And now if you see, the presets are added before the name of the actual jobs and pipelines. Now if you notice one thing, we are missing schemas here. This is because we didn't include the schema folder here, right? So we have to include the schema folder as well. So let me just add the schema folder here. Now this minus symbol here means array in YAML. Okay, we are specifying different values in arrays. Okay, so this is all YAML syntax. So I have added schemas, and let me just refresh it again, and now you'll see the schema as well with the preset. Okay, so let's just wait for it. Awesome. Now if you see, it says dev is with data, and then it specifies bronze. And now if you see, the bronze and the is with data is together. Okay, but that doesn't matter because we now know how the schema name would look like, how the pipeline name would look like, and how the job would look like, right? But one thing that we missed is, in order to change or pass in the name of our schema and catalog in the pipeline. Right now it is still hard coded as dev and bronze, right? So what I'll do is I'll quickly open the pipeline configuration again. So I'll just go to resources, I'll go to pipelines, and I'll open this. And now we have to change this, right? It has to refer the catalog name, right, from the scheme, correct? So what we'll do is we'll use variables, right? So we'll just write resources dot, what is the resources? The resources is schemas, right? And then what was the name of the schema? So let me just go into this. So within resources we have schema, and the name prefix of the schema was bronze schema, and the name of the schema was bronze, right? So I'll just copy this. I'll quickly go back to the YAML again, and then after schemas we have to push bronze schema, and then we have to give the name. Okay, so that would be the name of the schema, but we have to give the catalog name, right? So that is catalog underscore name. Okay, so if I go back, this is catalog underscore name, right? Now again we have to provide the schema name as well. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this whole thing from here, I'll paste it here, but this is no longer catalog name, but this is name, right? So what we are doing is we are referencing the resources that will get created with this dabs, right? So it is going to create a resource for schema with the name prefix bronze schema, and we are going to capture the actual name of that schema from here, right? And we'll pass it to the pipeline. Similarly for catalog, we are going to capture what is the catalog name from the resources scheme. And if I go to schemas, we are going to capture the catalog name from the variable. Correct? So now you understand how you can configure a dabs project very easily. Okay, I know this is confusing, but nothing to worry about as of now. Okay, so we are going to deploy this now. So I'm just going to go back to deployments, and I'm going to refresh it again. Awesome. Now you can see everything is there, whatever we have configured. Now in order to deploy, we just have to click on this deploy button. Okay, and now once you verified all of the resources that will get deployed once you deploy this, just click on this deploy button. Now it will run the deployment here. Now, one more important point to note here is this is all running on serverless. So your workspace should have serverless enabled in order to use this dabs from here. Okay. Now you can see it says finished deployment, right? Let's quickly go back into a different tab. I'll just click here. Then I'll go to jobs and pipelines. And now you can see here dev is with data DLT orders pipeline deployed, right? Similarly, if I go to jobs here, you can see dev is with data dab demo job deployed. Okay, now similarly in pipelines you can say DLT orders pipelines, right? So if I click on all, you can see both of the resources deployed here. You can even go ahead and see if the schemas are configured properly for this pipeline or not. Okay, so you can just open this pipeline here, you can go to settings. Okay, and if you scroll down here, if you see that catalog is default dev, because we have not specified any catalog parameter while running that, right? But the schema, if you see, is the newly created schema that got deployed with our bundle, right? This was the schema that was supposed to get deployed, right? So you can see that schema is now referred in our pipeline. And now you understand how we configured this whole project, correct? And this is how dynamic production dabs projects are being configured. Okay, now one more important point to note here is, now, if you want to override the variable, now since we didn't specify any variable, the variable was defaulted to dev, right? So if you want to change the variable value, just click on these three dots, select configure variable override. Okay, and here you can specify the variable. For example, if you want to specify a different catalog for the variable, just type the variable name, which is for us is catalog, and the name. For example, if you wanted to do it in dev underscore one, for example, this is the catalog name. So you can just override, and if you click deploy now, it will try to deploy the schema in dev underscore one, right? But since we do not have anything like dev underscore one, so I'll just remove it from here. Okay, and I'll close this. Okay, now you know how you can create that project and how you can deploy it using the UI interface. Let's go ahead and see how we can use the CLI in order to deploy our dApps. Okay, so before I do that, let me show you one more thing. Okay, so what has happened is, if I go to my pipeline which was deployed now, if I hover here, you can see the path here, right? It is still pointing to the repos path, correct? Repo, ADB, CICD, resources and all. You don't see any bundle folder deployed here, because the UI development mode is using the exact source in order to deploy the jobs and pipelines. So if I go back here, if I just click here at the bottom, if I go to deployment output, you can see it says source link deployment. Okay, it means it is still pointing to the exact source, which is our feature demo branch in the repo. But in general cases, you should deploy using the bundle folders. Okay, and that can be done using CLI. So now we are going to use CLI in order to deploy our dApps project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a compute Okay, and all purpose compute here, I'm going to run this, and we are going to run terminal in this compute, and we are going to run our CLI command from this compute itself. Okay, so we'll wait for this compute to spin up, and then we are going to run terminal through this compute itself. Now my cluster is up and running, and I've just attached it to a notebook that we have created previously. Okay, so in the bottom right hand corner you can see something called terminal. Just click on this button. Okay, now just click on terminal. Now you can find a message says web terminal is disabled on this workspace. Now in order to enable web terminal, what you can do is, I'll just open one more tab. I'll just click on the right hand top. I'll click on settings. Then we will go to compute here. I'll just scroll down. So it says web terminal here. It is off right now. Just click on this to enable it. Okay. So this is enabled. Now let me just go back to this notebook page and I'll refresh this again. Great. Now you can see our web terminal is ready. Okay. Now it is important to note that in order to use web terminal, just attach it to any one of the notebook that you use and just click on the right hand bottom and use this terminal. Okay. You can even expand this, click in this particular button. So it will open this web terminal in a new session. So I'll just click on this here. It is going to open this in a new session. Okay. I'll just zoom in a bit. And now we are going to change this to our workspace folder where our dApps project is present. So for that, I'll just type cd/workspace/repos. Okay, and then it is under ESB data, and then I will type ADB CICD. This is the place where our dApps project is present, right? So in order to validate, just type ls-ldr. Okay, and now you can see databricks.yaml is present here. It means our dApps project is created here. Okay, so I'll just clear everything for now. And now we are going to use CLI in order to deploy our Databricks Asset Bundle. Okay, now before we do that, we don't need to authenticate this particular CLI with any profile because we have already logged in and this particular compute is running in our workspace. Okay, so it is already authenticated. So in order to verify, just type Databricks and then you can say catalogs and you can say list. Okay, and hit enter. So it will just install the CLI first. Just wait for a second. And now you can see all of the catalogs, right? So it means our profile is already authenticated here and we don't need to specify any profiles. It is going to use my credentials in order to authenticate. Okay, so let me just clear it. Okay, now we have already deployed our asset from the UI, right? So if I quickly go back to the UI, you can see there is a folder created called .databricks. So it uses Terraform internally, and in order to manage your deployments, it uses this folder. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to first remove everything. Okay, and then we are going to use CLI in order to install. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type a command called Databricks Bundles. Okay, destroy. Okay, so it is going to use the configuration within this our folder already, which is specified, right? Databricks YAML, which is already present. Okay, now I'm just going to use a target. For that, I'll say -t. Okay, in order to specify the target, and I'll say def. Okay, so we are just instructing the CLI to remove everything from the target, which is def, which is deployed as part of the configuration, which is present under this folder, which is ADB CICD, and our Databricks.yaml is present under this folder already, right? So I'll just hit enter here. And it says, do you mean bundles? I'll just rewrite. I think I have just made a mistake. I said bundles. It should be bundle. I'll hit enter. Okay, it says Y or N. I'll just say Y because we want to remove everything. It already gives me that it is removing a job, a pipeline, and a schema. Okay, I'll just hit enter Y. Okay, it says destroy complete. It means everything is removed. Let's go ahead and validate. So I'll quickly go to the compute page. I'll go here. I'll go to jobs and pipelines. And now you can see there is nothing, right? You cannot find any preset or any job created with preset, right? So everything is removed. So I'll quickly go back to brown schema and you can still see the .databricks folder here, right? So what we'll do is I'll drop this folder as well. So I'll just move it to trash. Okay, so that we can deploy everything from scratch. So this is our Databricks bundle that we have configured, right? It does not contain .databricks now. And even we have removed everything. Okay, so let me just go back to CLI and I'll clear the screen. Okay, and now in the dev, I'll add one more preset, that is source linked deployment as false, because we want to create our bundle folders and we want our jobs to read from that bundle folders, not directly from the repo folders. Okay, so we also want that the bundle folders get deployed and our jobs read from those bundle folders. Okay, so what we need to do is we'll just go to dev.yaml again. So I'll just click on this dev.yaml. And before I run CLI, I just need to add one more thing here. I'll just type source linked deployment. Okay, and I'll make it false. Okay, so what it would make sure is it would also deploy a folder called dot bundle, and the jobs and the pipelines are going to refer that particular folder, dot bundle folder, in order to get the notebooks or the resources, whatever is required. Okay, so I'll quickly go back to CLI. Now I'll just type ls minus LART to showcase all of the content that we have within this folder, which is ADB CICD. And now you can see we have databricks.yaml file here, but we don't have the .databricks folder because we have removed it so that we can deploy everything from scratch. Okay. Now let me just clear this screen. And the first thing that we will do is we'll validate our bundle. So I'll just type Databricks bundle validate, and I'll put -t, which is for the target. Okay, and I'll just type def. Okay, so we'll make sure that we are using validate, -t is for target, and our target is def. I'll hit enter. Awesome. Now you can see it has validated. You get a warning here because we have configured the permissions at the parent level, and this is why the warning is there. So if you remove the permission from the parent bundle configuration, automatically this warning would go off. Okay, so I'll just clear now, and now we will see what all would be deployed using a command called summary. So I'll just type Databricks bundle summary, and I'll use again -t for the target, and we want to deploy it in dev. So I'll just hit enter. Awesome. Now, if you notice that the path from where all the files would be read is from dot bundle. Okay. And we are going to create this folder under my parent folder. And then we are going to get a folder called dot bundle. And then under that, you will have the bundle folder, and under that, the target folder. Okay. And this all resources will be deployed. So there will be one job which will be deployed, one pipeline, and one schema. Okay. So now that we are satisfied with our summary, I'll just clear this, and now we will deploy our Databricks asset bundle. Okay. So in order to do that, I'll just type Databricks bundle, and now we'll use a command called deploy, and then we have to specify the target, which is T, because we are going to deploy in dev. So I'll just type dev, T is for target, and now we can specify the variables as well. So if you remember, we used catalog as a variable. So in order to do that, just type --var, and the name of the variable was catalog, and the value that we want to pass is def. Now for dev, it is not mandatory because we have defaulted the value to dev catalog itself. Now, in case of deploying in QA, you have to pass different catalog name, right? So in those cases, we can go ahead and use this thing called --var, and we can specify different values for the variable, which is catalog. Okay. So for now, our name of the catalog is dev. So we'll keep it as dev. And now I'll just hit enter. Okay. So it is just installing CLI, and then it will run the bundle. Okay, now if you see, it is creating a dot bundle folder. Okay, it is uploading everything into dot bundle, and then it is going to create jobs, and those are going to refer to this particular folder. And that is what we need, because if in development a scenario multiple developers are working, they should always create their own dot bundle rather than referring directly to the repo folders, right? So if someone changes anything within the repo folder, everyone's code would change, right? So in order to make sure that everyone has their different folder, so you have to make sure that you specify source linked deployment as false. In those cases, everyone would get their own dot bundle folder under their username folder, so that the jobs would read from that dot bundle folder. And if you remember, when we first deployed through UI without specifying source linked deployment as false, it was reading directly from the repo folder, right? So now that our deployment is complete, let's go and verify. So I'll quickly go here. I'll go to jobs and pipeline again. And now if you see, we have the demo job and the pipeline created. Okay. So let me just quickly open the demo job. And if I go to task, so if you see here, now it is pointing to bundle. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this path from here and I'll paste it here. Okay. And now if you see, it is going into my username under a folder called dot bundle, under that the name of the bundle, and then the environment, and under that there are files in which it is pointing to this particular notebook. Okay, so now you know how the bundles are deployed. Okay, we can go ahead and see that bundle as well. So I'll just go to workspace here. I'll go to home, and under that you'll find dot bundle. Okay, within this you'll find dab demo, and then dot dav, and under files you're going to find the whole folder structure that we created for our dabs, right? You can find resources and the source, and under resources, here are the notebooks that are being pointed by the jobs and the pipelines. Okay, so this is how bundles are getting created. And you have to make sure, if there are different developers working and you don't want everyone to point to the same repo files and have their own dot bundle folder, so you have to make sure that you specify this in your preset. Okay, source linked deployment as false. Now, before we wrap up, one of the most important part is we have to make sure that we add .databricks to this git ignore so that we don't push this .databricks to the remote branch. Okay, because in the remote branch we only need the code. We don't want this .databricks to be there. Okay, everyone would have their own .databricks created when they try to deploy, right? You're not going to have this common for everyone, so you don't need to push this into the remote branch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete it from here. Okay, and I'm going to click on git ignore, and I'm going to add it here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type dot databricks slash. This is all done. Let's go ahead and push our code. So I'll just click on this branch here, and you can see we have modified git ignore and dev. I'll just say updated code, and I'll click on commit and push. Okay, so our dApps project is complete and it is on the feature slash demo branch. Let's get into our Azure DevOps and verify. Okay, I'm back in my Azure DevOps repo and I've refreshed, and now you can see our code here, right? You can see resources, SRC, and all of the code that we created. Okay, so today we covered how we can go ahead and create a dApp project, how you can use UI to deploy, how you can go ahead and use CLI in order to deploy. In our next video, we are going to use Azure Pipeline in order to deploy this dApp project in a different QA environment. And in order to do that, the important part is we have to make sure that we can use pipeline. Okay, so one thing that you have to make sure that you do it before the next video is go to this project setting and go to this parallel jobs here. And now you should see free tier, one parallel job with 1800 minutes here. Okay, if this is not there for you for the Microsoft hosted, if you don't see free tier enabled for you, you have to make sure you have to get it enabled. Okay, in order to get it enabled, just search in the Google DevOps Microsoft hosted enable. Okay, and hit enter. Now it would give you first link, which is Microsoft hosted agents. Just click on this and then scroll down to capabilities and limitations in the same page. And here you can find something called submit a request. Just click on this here. Okay, it would open up a page. You have to make sure you fill this up. And once you fill this up, you will get something called free tier enabled here. And it might take a day or two. So I would recommend that you do it right away so that you should be able to follow me along on the next video. Okay, so in our next video, we are going to configure Azure Pipeline. Okay, and we are going to use this Azure Pipeline to deploy our dApp in QA environment. I know this video was lengthy, but today we covered a production grade dApp setup, right? And this would be very useful for you. See you in the next video. Till then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing.